day of glorious triumph, and so forth, carrying no weapons, he crushed the skulls and cast them into the waters, and soon the seas ran red with their blood. But not all were dead. Soon Mera came, and from the broken trees of the earth she forged the first spear, and with it she stabbed at them, slashing. And soon her husband and brother, Arquatane, the god of the hunt, hunted for the rest of them. He forged from the rest of the trees and the torn hairs of the giants the first bow, and from this he slaughtered the last, stalking and hunting them across the world, until finally the giants were dead. And by this time the world had settled back into its normality. In the north were the ice lands, the Bifrost, and these were the men of Northland, the Iceborn, men who had white hair, great blue eyes, tall, 8 feet tall was the highest. Great beards was their known tradition, for the beard was the symbol of manhood. And then, to the south of these men were the Celts, or to us they would be Celts. They were called the gods. The gods were governed by Mera, goddess of the wild and all growing things. She made a people red of hair and green of eye, a people devoted to being free and wild, living as they please, while hitherto living peacefully. And to the south of this, her husband Aquitaine made the first men of the plains, the riders of horse, saddlers, and the greatest hunters the world had ever seen. They were the Gelderland men, the Gelderland. And on this continent, all people came to be known as the Sutton folk. In the far north, Donar, the god of war, took this land for himself and created the greatest war tribe ever to exist. They would be strong. Their culture would be born from steel and blood. And all would know that their name would be written in the stars by Donar himself. And why would they do this? Why all this faith gathered? Merely for power, for vanity. How else can a being survive without power? So, the final one to receive any land was Nehelenia. Nehelenia, the goddess of lust, felt rather screwed over, basically. So she took the greatest amount of land there was, but the poorest. She chose the lands to the east, which were barren and dying, men starving, water scarce. But they were very wise people. Like people of black hair, tan of skin, black of eye. And far off in the sea, she took the land of the black hair, the true, the pure folk. And on this land, this great island mass, she created her paradise. And there she fornicated and lived free and basically lived as a goddess amongst men.
The girl. Brave enough to put this on the fire. Like literally sit it right on top.
Avery, you should like do a speaker for all our ET. Honestly, have you thought about this?
I'm gonna put on the Lord of the Rings soundtrack.
The video picked that up.
Because we'd make the AT so much better.
Now, the lands to the east were barren. Thus forth, Nehelenia cared little for it. She visited momentarily, but found nothing of desirable. And so forth, she left the East men to their own suffering. And from there they forged their own nations and worshipped their own gods, unborn and unreal. They remembered old gods, such as the giants, god of the sun. Now, on her island paradise, she created a people more beautiful than any. People fair of skin, great, dark blue eyes, black hair, wavy. Their culture was forged upon beauty and strength, but not in the strength of glorious combat as much as athleticism. They were a people of game and song, fornication and lust and drink. So forth, they were very uncaring. Now, through all the years of fornication and lust, Nehelenia had created children of her own, the demigods. Now, one born of the blood of the gods carries with him the power to accept faith from man. In other, he takes from the gods with his own blood, takes the faith of that man and binds it to his soul, giving him power. And through this, Donar became angered. Furious was he when he learned that her power, their power, the reason they had come there was being cast away on weaker and lesser people. And so, he took his warring people and gave them the longship. And the longship sent them far. Glorious lands were conquered and torn and ravaged, pillaged and raped. The soil torn and blackened. Nothing but blood in the sea. The sun was blotted out by arrows. The heavens clashed with thunder and lightning. And as the Northmen came to this island paradise, a great thunderous tremble came. Dona had come with them. And so forth, men of the north went about, taking the slaves of women, sacrificing these men who had for so long cared so little of real things. They took from them their lives. But only few survived this carnage, this great and evil war. And these few were left with a barren land, weakened, without growing things. Animals were scarce. Only blood remained. And there is one ritual that man can do in dire times. Nehelania, after this great war, was taken to the moon for imprisonment and forced to wade out through the dead. The gods had made their first land, the land they appeared upon, to be the land of the dead, where the souls who did not worship would gather and suffer for many days. And once a month they would return and be reborn. Nehelania would go there, and she would wade through them, sending them forth, making them suffer. She hated it. It was the epitome of everything she had never wanted. And so forth, she was angered. And when her people of the black hair and fair skin began to sacrifice to her, they demanded the ability to thrive off of blood. And so forth, these people who once were beautiful became the vampires. They no longer can walk in the sun without being shown as beasts winged, fangs adorned, eyes black as night, and they only hunger for blood and lust. They cannot bear children, for they are dead. And so forth did these lands fall to vampires and bloodshed, while the Northmen returned home with slaves, and they created a mighty, strong empire forged from the ashes of the old one from the south. And so forth the great war ended. However, some of Nehelania's children had survived and had begun to mingle themselves into the lands of the west. And so forth, Nehelania's strongest child had come to the southlands of Gelderland, the great hunters. Now, for many aeons, the Gelderlands had survived against the attacks from the gods, who would pillage villages along their borders, just beyond the forests. And this man came and brought to them great wealth and power. He brought to them the first true civilization, strong and mighty, organized, and so forth. They became an empire. Now this empire, after many years of being tormented by the barbarians from the north, decided it was time that they would become glorious. So forth, the south invaded the northern Gelderland. The gods were conquered. War raged. Men red of hair, adorning kilts, adorning freedom upon their backs and in their hearts, fought for their very lives. And in times of dire need, of course, they made sacrifice. And their greatest sacrifice of all was to create the one beast that could save them from the south. Upon a night of full moon, in a stone circle, adorned with the heads of their gods. They worshipped, and they sacrificed a man and a wolf together. In an attempt to stop this invading force, they created the werewolf. The werewolf came upon them, and he was the first, the God's wolf. The God's wolf would go about laying waste to the Southland, and each man that survived its attacks would to himself become a werewolf. However, only the God's wolf maintained his human form, his human self within the beast. And only on full moons would the werewolves appear. However, only upon the nights when the full moon glowed blue, when the souls were sent back to earth, would the God's wolf rise. Hitherto, because of their organized forces, their use of shield, sword together, the Geldermen conquered God. And so forth came to end that war. Now for about 100 years, the gods remained under the rule of the Geldermen, and the Geldermen used them as slaves of their own, more so slaves of society, much as we are seeing today in our world. They began to care less for their gods, and they worshipped an emperor, the son of Nehelenia. But soon enough, there came a time when the Geldermen tried to invade the northlands of Donar. They tried to take Bifrost, but their ships were weak, uncomparable to that from Donar himself. They could not cross the waters without crashing upon the rock. They could not cut through sea as the ships of the Northmen could. Until the day the Geldermen slew the daughter of the High King of the North. Upon that day, the High King took up his sword and demanded great blood from the south. And so forth, a new battle was set into place. The North then came to war once more, and they attacked in God, pillaging, destroying the empire, freeing the gods, and soon the gods took up arms themselves and fought alongside them. The gods and the Northmen ravaged the countryside, and they tore the empire down to rubble and ash. Eventually, the North King came upon the battlements to the one man who ordered the death of his daughter. And he threw his sword upon him, and the man himself fell to death. Thusly the man took his head, hoisted it to the sky, and cried out Donar's name, demanding lightning strike the cities beneath him. And Donar answered. The great thunderous and mighty spectacle shown. Donar sent his lightning, blazing the south, just as he did to the island in the east. Soon enough, the empire fell. However, Nehelenia's son had fled upon ships of his own. He fled to the far east, to the barren lands, and there he found solitude with very rich people. How did they become as such? They had no real gods. They had no worship of a real one. No Aether God to stand behind them and give them power. The reason? When men were pressed to the hardest and weakest point, they had to think. And so forth. From the most barren of lands, they found ways of survival, using everything they could from one single animal. Finding gems in rock and stone, silk, oil, things that fueled their empires of their own. And so forth, they had grown by this time. And Nehelenia's son found himself prosperous there. And he brought the worship of Nehelenia to them. So forth, these people who once had worshipped none began to worship Nehelenia, for they saw the power of her son. And time went on. The earth settled back to its ways. Man stayed in his homeland, and the South became once more a republic rather than an empire, kept to themselves, and the Godlands remained free. Society built upon not telling others what to do, what to say, what to feel. A society of liberty and freedom. A society built upon the ideal that no man is a slave. None is my master. None can dictate what I do. But thusly, the gods themselves became distracted and weak, uncaring, such as the men of the islands of yore. Soon enough, the Hellenia's son returned, in great force, with hordes from the east, and they laid waste to the lands of the west. However, they were not very successful. The gods, though uncaring, were strong. They had learned well from the Empire's attacks, and they drove them back into the sea. However, they knew that they had to end this once and for all. The Hellenia's son had to be slain, and so forth they gathered a great alliance of the north, of the land of the Grey, which had broken from the land of God, and of the south. They created a great alliance and went forth unto the east. And from there, the story ends. It's not completed yet. But still the war rages on. Blood is shed. In an age of glory and strife, men call to their gods and call to dead gods. They call to what they believe in. But soon enough, one side will win and one will lose. It will be the west of the great, fair-skinned men, believing in strong gods, strong heart, free people. Or it will be the east, men who devoted their lives to slavery, to worshipping a goddess who only wants vengeance, rather than to aid civilization. It is unknown. But for now, the age of glory and strife continues on.